A little bit of background. So as he mentioned, 10 years almost with Liferay, various kinds of projects. I'm in the consulting arm of US Global Services for Liferay. And my background is in science, not computer science, but physics. So I really like the data. So I appreciate some of the science angle of the previous two talks. So I've been thinking lately about the projects I've been on for the last number of years, and trying to summarize what I think are those key habits that are useful. So, I mean, we already invoked Einstein once today, but so you're going to say, oh, you're a scientist, then stop talking, show me the data, right? I would love to do that. I'm only kind of sort of going to do that, okay? So I'm a consultant, I code day in, day out, I lead a team. So I don't have hard and fast data here for you. What I'm using instead is a well-known book from a few years back. How many of you have seen this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Any show of hands? A few. And read it as well? So I'm not giving anything away. All right. So I'm using this as a framework, right? This is a book I read years ago. And I'm using it as a way to gather the information I have, the data I have from projects I've been on, okay? So the book is about being a highly effective person. I mean, there's many business books out there. There's one that I found useful years ago. I'm trying to extrapolate that to highly effective or highly successful Liferay projects. So the match may not be perfect, but that's the model for today, okay? So the talk's about maybe a third, using the book as a framework, a third agile and the agile practices that I've seen on good teams, and a third some Liferay stuff that plays out, okay? So what's a habit? I mean, this is maybe obvious, but a habit is that intersection. You got to start at science talk. You got to start with a Venn diagram. It's that intersection of knowledge and skills and desire. I can't do all that stuff in a 25, 30-minute talk, right? But I'm going to try to at least highlight some of those pieces. Like, what are those habits that effective teams tend to have? So the book breaks down the skills of effective people into a couple different sets. It starts with a set of private practices, the term used in the book. So these are things that you can do as an individual contributor, whatever your role is in life or on a team, right? Things that you can do that will make you more effective, make your team more effective, right? So private practices. The first one is being proactive. What's the opposite? The opposite of being proactive is being reactive, right? Something happens, you react, right? Maybe in good ways, maybe in bad ways, but you react to what's happening to you. So habit one is getting this mentality, and there's a little bit of philosophy here, maybe that's a commonality from the previous talks, right? A little bit of philosophy, but you instead of reacting to what happens, you find a way to be proactive. This is a term from the book, which is not a software book, but he says, you're the programmer. Get in your head that you can be proactive, you can be a programmer. So what does that look like in the Liferay space? You're doing one of those things right now, right? You came to DevCon, ModConf, you came to a symposium. You are getting information, right? Part of being proactive is knowing what your options are. So I listed a few here. Like I say, this is one of them. Others include dev.liferay. If you were at the unconference, there were some comments about how the content on Liferay tends to be more business sales oriented. Dev.liferay is for the developers. If you haven't been there, there's a lot of useful information. Liferay forums, Google's always handy. We have a community newsletter. There are places that you can go to get information about what Liferay is and what you can do with it. And the reason I think that supports being proactive is if you have that information, even if you don't know how to do all those things, you at least know those things exist. So Liferay training is a good example. If you've been through Liferay training, you know there's just a ton of information you get in a very short period of time. You get these list of features, all these things that you could be doing with Liferay. You come to DevCon and you hear about all these things you can do with DXP. Part of being proactive is knowing what they are. Even if you don't know how to use them, you know what they are. So you know the list of features, you know there's web content, you know there's workflow, you know there's themes and color schemes, there's these things that you could use. So when something happens in your project, instead of reacting and going, oh, I gotta build something new, you say, oh, I remember this thing they talked about at training, which was workflow. That might be useful in this scenario. Oh, we wanna do this thing, we wanna rebrand part of our site. Hey, maybe a color scheme would come into play. So being proactive is gathering information, finding ways to stay in the loop, and it is a moving target. I mean, I'll be the first. If you've been around Liferay a little while, you know that DXP is very different from 6.2, which was fairly different from 6.1. It's a moving target, but find a way to stay engaged. Help us help you. The second habit, this is a little bit vague, but beginning with the end in mind. If you've done any woodworking, one of the phrases is you measure twice, you cut once, right? You get that model in your head of what you want to do before you do it, because otherwise there's waste. Otherwise you end up throwing away that piece of wood. You end up rebuilding that module. His terms are, you write the program. You're the programmer in habit number 1, and habit number 2, you are writing the program. So what does that mean for an effective project or a successful project? I use this image here of embracing change. I didn't say like change. How many of you like change? Show of hands. Come on, nobody likes change? Got one guy in the front. It's a feature of software, right? It's a feature of projects that there's going to be change. The business didn't tell you all the requirements. They didn't know all the requirements. Okay, different show of hands. How many of you have been on a project and halfway through the business says, oh yeah, we want to do this? Okay, 80% of the way through. Last week before going into production, they say, oh yeah, we also want to do this. Show of hands? This has got to be a little bit interactive here, right? It happens, right? So an effective project, and maybe the week before production isn't the time to be doing it, but an effective project, an effective team, as a individual, even an individual contributor, you've found a way to embrace it. Maybe you don't love it, maybe you don't like it, like some people do, but you've found a way to fold that into the processes on your team. So it's thinking for the long term. A lot of what is being talked about in the ModConf track is that modularity, right? Single responsibility principle is an old design pattern that you've designed your modules so that they can be reused. They're maintainable, they're flexible, and at a personal level, this project is survivable. That you're not working 80 hours a week for months on end, but you found a way to embrace change in a way that scales. And my last bullet here is that quality matters. This habit is a little bit generic, but you've found an effective team finds a way to live inside that iron triangle from project management, right? That you've got this set of scope, the set of features, you've got this set of people you've got a timeline, and you don't sacrifice quality to try to find a balance there. So an effective team, through communication and some of the later habits, finds a way to manage that. Okay, so habit number 3 really supports this, and this I think is where, as an individual, I've got a little bit more to say about what this looks like in Liferay. Has anybody seen this quadrant before? You may not have seen it from the book, but on the vertical axis we have importance, on the horizontal you have urgency. Is this familiar? Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2, speak. It's one of the things I still use in my life with my kids, with my wife, is ascertaining whether something you're talking about is truly something we need to do right now or later, okay? So Quadrant 1 is the stuff you're gonna do. Quadrant 1 is, this stuff is important and it's urgent. My car is on fire. Well, we should probably handle that. The production server just got hacked. Probably gonna need to deal with that, right? Quadrant 1 stuff is usually pretty obvious that you're gonna have to deal. Quadrant 2 is the stuff that's not in your face. So Quadrant 2, it's important. You know it's important, but it's not urgent, right? It's not breathing down your neck. It's gonna be important at some point. It's, using my car example, you should change your oil sometimes, or you might wind up at the side of the road with your car on fire, right? That's a Quadrant 2 thing you should do, and hopefully you've got some mechanism for remembering that. If it comes to Liferay, you should deploy a reasonably recent fix pack. It's gonna have security fixes. If you do that Quadrant 2 item, which isn't urgent, you avoid the Quadrant 1 emergency when your production server is hacked, or it's crashed, or you name it. But Quadrant 3 is where we spend a lot of time. And I think you'll recognize this. Quadrant 3 are the things that are urgent, but if you really stop and think about it, as a team or as an individual, you realize they're maybe not the most important. These are the things that Maybe it's the 6 chat clients that I confess I have, right? It's the things that, hey, somebody's trying to get my attention. Hey, it's the things that are happening today. Oh, it's the interesting topic that came across on Facebook. Hey, I'm based in the US. Hey, it's the election results. It's important at some level, but during the day job, it's not important. It's only urgent. It's only in my face. So how do you do that, right? Prioritization is tricky, right, on a team or as an individual. How do you find a way to do these things? So here's I've got a few slides here on habit number 3. Like how do you put first things first? How do you do those quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 things? The first time is say yes to important things. Say yes to having that conversation around what is important on a team. And you got to involve the business, right? If you don't have this discussion in your team, then what happens is somebody's going to decide, right? So you've got 1,000 tickets, and the developer just picks some, right? So pick your agile practice, Kanban, or whatever. There are ways to manage those. But say yes to finding a way to do those quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 things. Say yes to good requirements. How many of you have been on a short iteration, 2 or 4 weeks or whatever, you're halfway through and realize that the requirements are pretty much missing. You don't know what success is. Okay, it's pretty typical, right? If you're not saying yes, it means either you just don't want to admit it, or maybe you didn't notice how often it happens. I'll predict that. Okay, so say yes to good requirements. Up front, you're hoping to go into those short iterations, you've got clear requirements. Say yes to right engineering. So the agile term here is you make it work, you make it right, you make it fast, right? So that's the performance side of it. People have heard that phrase before, make it work, make it right, make it fast. Is that familiar? That's an old agile term. So making it work is where many teams, and I'm not pointing fingers at you, I'm pointing fingers at the projects I've been on, right? Many teams will stop at make it work, right? Oh, I need a feature over here. It's very like this feature. Hey, cut and paste that over here. That makes it work, but it isn't right. From the previous talks, that's ugly in some way, right? That's not modular. Now I've got the same functionality in 2 places, and when there's a bug discovered later, which there will be, I've now duplicated it. Related to that is, so final encouragement there is, take the time in your project to do that quadrant 2 item, which is just refactoring a little, right? Looking for duplication. Get it working in the first place, and then figure out how to make it cleaner. Not perfect, but make it cleaner so you haven't duplicated that code everywhere. Liferay has those extension points. It has those ways to share code, to do dependencies. Now in DXP, you can write those contracts with your modules. You really have the tools you need to make it cleaner, to make it right. Next on my list of saying yes is saying yes to fixing broken windows. I don't know about you, but sometimes I've been on teams that have a laundry list, a long list of tech debt. Right? That's definitely quadrant 2. Those are those things that you're in the project. If you know the phrase broken windows, the idea is if you have a house or a factory and there's one broken window and it just stays broken, it's really easy to break another one. Or see one broken and think, why should we fix it? There's 2 broken windows, and now there's 3, and now there's 4. You've probably seen code bases like that, right? Oh, why should I fix this thing over here? I've seen 5 more problems over here. Why can't I copy that portlet? I've seen it done 15 times in this project, right? So find a way to fold it into your process, fix broken windows. Even if you didn't break them, right? The whole team, hopefully, owns that code base, try to fix them. And finally, from Liferay, and this is a key thing, is find a way to extend Liferay. I've seen teams that are so keen to use what they learned in Liferay training that everything is a brand new portlet. There's a lot of functionality in Liferay. We've been doing this for how many years now? 15? Who can tell me the year? 2000, I think, was when Brian started. So it's almost 16 years, right? There's a lot of code. We've been revising it. We've been extending it. DXP gives you even more options. Find a way to say no to it wasn't built here and build your own thing every single time, and try to find a way to use those stock features. All right, so a couple examples here on what that looks like. In 6X, some of you, I'm curious, I haven't seen this yet today. There was a little bit yesterday in the unconference, but how many of you are on DXP already? Yeah, it's pretty early still. 6.2? 6.1? 5.2? One in the back. 5.1? All right. This is a good time for you to get excited. 4? Okay, 4. You still have a 4-4 instance? Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed and depressed at the same time. I started on 4.3, so I can't go back farther than that. 4.1. All right. So extension points have changed a lot over the years. What you can extend in Liferay, how you can leverage Liferay has changed a lot. It's changed pretty significantly from 6.2 to DXP. So if you're here at DevCon, hopefully you'll learn some of that, what it looks like to use OSGI, what it looks like to use those extension points. In 6X, there's still a lot of ways to do it. You can use hooks, you can use JSPs. If you're at the unconference, you may have heard that EXT is coming back. It's still not recommended. Okay, I have to ask, because I like to be interactive. How many of you are using EXT? Oh, okay, that's good. My hand's up. We use EXT because there's things that are requirements we can't achieve without EXT. So it's coming back in DXP. It was taken out and put back in again, or will be shortly. You're basically forking Liferay at that point. So in terms of a practice, try to avoid forking Liferay. Try to avoid completely diverging because your upgrades will be much harder later on. In DXP, these are OSGI fragments, annotations, you name it. I'm going to put 2 throwaway comments in here. Under the topic of extending, I'm just going to highlight these. If you want to talk to me afterwards, fine. I'll be here for the whole time. Use role-based access controls. Please use that to its full ability. Look at dev.liferay, understand that. Don't put a lot of checks in your code for, does this user have this role? That's not flexible. So that's a hint to you later on. And service layer stuff. Think about transactions. The service builder, the service layers are really key in terms of extending Liferay and taking advantage of a lot of things within Liferay. Okay, next topic. I mentioned this earlier on. DRY. My team gets so tired of me saying DRY. Don't repeat yourself. I'm going to repeat it. Don't repeat yourself. The only time I can do it is when I'm saying DRY, and I repeat that all the time. My team gets so tired of it. This is one of those, again, the make it work, make it right. It's like 10% hit, right? You make it work. Getting rid of duplication is usually another 10, 15, 20% of finding a way through utilities or portlet configuration, a common service, some kind of modularity, some kind of composition, right, that lets you break out that duplication and share it. I'd say duplicate processes too. This is more at the team level. But if you're doing the same thing every day, if your QA person is doing the same thing every day, that's a form of duplication. Think about that as a red flag in your project. Okay, one more, two more on this habit of doing first things first. Testing. We don't think we talked about it today. We talked a little bit about it yesterday in the unconference. Hopefully you're doing some testing in your projects. And I don't mean just the developer tests the code you're writing in Liferay. You deploy the portlet, look at it, looks okay, it works. Okay, can I ask a question? How many of you have automated developer written tests, whatever you call them? Automated? Okay. How many of you have automated, like QA written full regression tests? Okay. I want to encourage you. This is back to the habits thing. This is the desire. Those are quadrant 2 things, but they are one of the keys. Some kind of automated framework gives you confidence for the future. Liferay is complicated. I'm a Liferay developer, been doing this for a while now. There's so many integration points. There are so many dependencies. Even with modularity and DXP, some kind of automated test framework buys you so much so that when you change something, when we implement something on Monday, you have some confidence that it still works on Wednesday. Okay, that's what the automated testing is supposed to give you, whether it's a module and it's some kind of unit test for a module or it's a full regression suite. Please, the teams I've really enjoyed being on have found a way to fold that into their processes. Is it free? No. Is it cost effective over time? Absolutely. One more here. My phrase for this is dev like prod. This is, again, a quadrant 2 thing. This is not Liferay specific, but find a way to develop like you're already in production. How many of you log in as Omni admin all the time for all your work? I'm seeing some laughter. Okay, you got to tell me. All the time. Okay. The problem with Omni admin, which I use some myself, right, is Omni admin can do everything. So if you care about security, if you care about user A only being able to do the things that you've defined for user A, and user B only doing the things that user B should be able to do, whether it's at the organization level or content, then then you want to be using those kinds of users in your testing, okay? There's a few other things on the list here, logging, debugger. There are some red flags in development that you want to think about. If I was in production, how would I do this? How would I figure out what's going on with my system? And so some of those things are logging. They are testing in QA just like it was production, whether it's staging, publishing, or clustering your third-party integration points. Finding a way to do those things, at least in QA, at least in UAT. Okay, that's the set of private practices. The next set are public practices. So they're the things that are and kind of encompass your team. They build on those private practices, but they require interaction. A lot of the private practices you can do, even if your whole team doesn't buy into it. You can start writing unit tests, even if they're not automated in your build. You can start looking for writing cleaner code, refactoring towards good patterns, even if the whole team's not doing that. You can fix the broken windows in your code, even if the rest of the team isn't it. Even in QA, you can find ways to do this. As a business owner, you can find ways to be proactive, to work through those things, right? Even if the whole team hasn't quite bought into it. The public practices require a little more, though. They require the team to get together. On this one, you have the axis of courage and consideration. You find that win-win. Boy, you gotta love some buzzwords from the book, right? This is an old book. Some of the things were new, I think, when the book came out. But you're finding that solution that it's not developers versus QA versus business. It's not things went wrong in production. It was the business's fault. They gave us bad requirements. It's we failed as a team. Right? Or we succeeded as a team because we worked closely with QA to test it. The business gave us requirements that we clarified with them, and you find that solution that is a win-win. So how do you accomplish this on a Liferay project? And I said at the beginning, right, there's a good mix of agile practices in here. A lot of finding a win-win solution is communication. And a lot of communication on a Liferay project is just controlling things. Have a process. Universal use of source control. All your portal code should be under control. Anything you use for portal configuration, whether you're using Puppet or Chef, portal ext serval properties, those are all things you want to have under control so that I have a real instance right now where I have a client who is hacked and they want to rebuild their server and they can do it because they can push a button. They can completely rebuild everything because they have everything under control. Again, communication, using tickets, whether it's Jira or your tool of choice. Find a way to track that work. Keep track of what you need to do still. Lightweight documentation, there's a few more things on the list. And actually using prioritization. So hopefully you're always using some kind of tracking system for the work that needs to be done in your project. They can't all be blockers. Or again, you're back to that position where the developers get to choose which things get done. So use some way of determining what is really quadrant one, what is really urgent and important versus it's just urgent. One more, this speaks to the modularity stuff that was talked about this morning. If you have, this is a question again. If you have third-party integrations, how many of you have those? I'm guessing you're calling another silo within your organization. You're calling outside to web services. In my experience with enterprise clients, that's like bread and butter. I've got 12, by last count, my current client has 12 external integrations. The key to keep to win-win there is finding clean contracts. That's part of modularity, but it's also part of just keeping sane, right? You know what the contracts are, you know how to test them, you know how to manage them. Same idea when you're working with QA. How do you find those handoffs between QA and dev? How about number 5? The shot still freaks me out. Pretty sure that's a shark in the background. It's situational awareness in this slide, but it's called seek first to understand. So I tend to have long-term projects. My current client I've been with for 3.5 years. I care a lot about maintainability, scalability, making sure we can keep this thing alive for as long as the client wants to keep it alive. And a lot of that is understanding what's happening in the project. Okay, so that's the agile practices of day-to-day, tracking your work, agile techniques for velocity and that kind of stuff. But in production, again, this is like the dev like prod business. Is some kind of ability to know what's happening in your production system. Some way of retaining your logs, some way of accessing them, keeping in mind permissions and all that. Some kind of APM tool, if you're using Dynatrace or New Relic or what else? AppDynamics, New Relic. There's others. Pick your tool of choice, right? Homegrown one sometimes even. But some way to know what's happening with your production servers. If you get hacked, if performance goes south, you have a way to see what's going on in your system. I list a few more here. Auditing of key events, clickstream tracking, service metrics, some kind of health dashboard. These are huge to understand what's really happening in your system. How many of you load test before you go to production? How many of you load test at all? Brett, you don't count. So a few of you, okay. I've been there. If you have an enterprise system, which many of you do if you're talking to my team, because we're global services and we're not always that cheap, you want to be doing this before you go live. Again, that's seeking to understand your system before you go in there. Do some performance tuning. There are plenty of tools. Talk to us afterwards. There's plenty of ways to handle that. The sixth habit, I don't know if this was a new term at the time, but the term is synergize, right? The idea is that if you work these private habits, these public habits, that in the end you get a team that it's just better. It's not ugly, Brian's talk maybe, right? You can survive it. You can go home at 5 or 6 or 7 and you can sleep at night. You're not fighting against QA, you're not fighting against the business. You found a way for the whole of the team to be greater than the parts. I've got nothing from a Liferay specific aspect there. But if you've been on one of those teams, it's fun. So the encouragement from me to you in this talk is it is possible. It is possible, so it's worth keeping that idea in mind that you could have a project that works like that. All right, those are the 6 practices. The 7th one is called sharpen the saw. The analogy is if you're cutting down a tree and you just keep cutting down trees, eventually your saw gets really dull. So sharpening the saw means be committed to, I have a couple ideas here for how you work this into your project, but you're reviewing what you're doing with an eye towards, can we make it better? We're looking at, can we renew this? Can we improve it? So that includes all the communication things before, open communication channels between you and whatever your role is, dev, QA, business, your key customers, that you're talking about what's working and what's not working, some kind of retrospectives, all these kinds of things. And again, like I said before, don't repeat yourself at the group level. If somebody is doing the same thing every single day, like clicking the same things all the time, that's duplication you want to try to get out of your system. And the last one I want to encourage you for is helping us. So how many of you have opened a Liferay ticket, a Lisa support ticket, if you have an enterprise system? Hey, that's great. Okay, that's a good show of hands. So I want to encourage you to keep doing that, okay? It's just like opening a radio ticket for your own team, but it's so helpful to us. I want to encourage you on doing that because I'll give you one example here. I had a Liferay upgrade project, so 6.1 to 6.2, and at the point we started the upgrade project, we had, I think, 80 Lisa tickets we had opened over the course of the 2 years of the project or something, right? And we actually had support help us to assess whether all those tickets we opened and received fixes for actually made it into 6.2, if they actually made it into master. And all but one had, so that's success right there. And the one that didn't was only because I'd opened it 2 weeks before and I hadn't had time to make it back into 6.2. So that's a form of data, right? We do use that. Our model is that if you give us a bug and we can reproduce it on master, which is DXP now, it's going to be folded in master first and then brought back to 6.2 or 4. I'm not sure about 4.4, but it's brought back to your release. So please help us improve the system. All right, that's the ecology, right? Private practices and the public practices give you that ability to keep improving. So go do it. Go be effective. You got what you need. A minute for questions? Yep.
Yeah, we have time for questions, yes. So okay. Raise your hands, not only for Lisa tickets, but also if you have questions or maybe you want to share some ideas about best habits. Anyone? I'm running.
Hello, thanks for all these best practices. I manage a team of the developers, and my Liferay architect always tell me it's too difficult to automate the test in Liferay. So can you please explain a bit more?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mentioned it's not cheap, right? So Liferay does this. It's not always the easiest thing. We use Selenium. You can talk to some of the folks here. They can probably give you some tips on how they're doing it. We have our own domain language that they basically use as a Selenium language that they can use to, execute the common stuff. Yeah, it's like anything with a web UI. It's not always a simple thing to do, but it's worth the effort. Yeah, maintaining it's usually the real pain there, especially with upgrades. So I don't, there's no magic pixie dust for anything as I talked about today. It's one of the things you got to kind of figure out what do you care about in your project, and look for the tools that work for you in your current project. Sorry. Anything else?
Any more questions?
One more answer on that. I want to say that there's some chance that one of the key problems with automated regression tests at that level is IDing fields on an HTML page because of the way Liferay generates unique IDs. Our QA team has been injecting like QA IDs as a data attribute. There's a chance that'll get folded back into master and be available to the team as well. So we could ask about that. I've heard rumors that may happen, so I can't promise it, but that would make things a lot easier. So, yeah.
Anyone more wants to have me running around with a question? No? All right, Nathan, thank you very much.
Thank you
for sharing your thoughts. And